Hi, good morning. It's Bronwyn here, and this is a fresh look at conversation. Today, our conversation was it was a fresh look at your relationship with thinking. It was lovely to be joined by Claire, Frank, Sandrine, and Sally. And we had it's a really peaceful conversation. I thought this one had a really lovely feeling. It calmed me. And it was really interesting. We considered what happens when you actually give yourself the opportunity to consider the possibility that something is thought. And it's a really fresh look at our relationship with thinking, basically. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you've got anything to share or say or reflections, then please find us at A Fresh Look At on Facebook or afreshlookat.co.uk website and send us a comment. So thanks a lot and take care. Enjoy listening. Anybody got anything? I think I'll just burst into tears, so I'd rather not talk.
Well, I think we should talk about that then.
No.
You don't want to hang on to your low mood, do you?
No, but listening to you guys will help. Whatever we talk about.
And silence is okay for a while as well, while we all tune into the space.
Yeah.
I can pause eating a bit, and I don't think any of you were on the Wisdom Entrepreneur on Monday. And anyway, it was lovely talk as always. And at some point, oh gosh, I can't even remember. But anyway, Jacqueline sort of just used this metaphor, and she said, you know, life is a bit like a rainbow. Even if we were talking about emotions. So life being the rainbow and emotions being each color. And she just said it and then kept talking. And oh my God, that just like something happened for me. And I was like, hold on. But because even if I don't like the purple, I wouldn't ever think of taking out the purple of the rainbow, right? Although, yeah, purple, buff. And I'm like, oh my God, if it's the same with being sad or being anxious, then if you just keep the yellow because they're happy, then you don't have the rainbow anymore. So it's not life anymore. So then I'm like, oh gosh, so I think it's quite cool if you like say, actually sadness or anxiety or whatever is one of these colors, and that's what makes it such a beautiful thing. I'm like, so yeah. So, and then I was like, in my, exploration of what's made up or what's not, I'm like, maybe the fact that sad and anxious and all this feeling that we say are bad, like, maybe that's made up as well. Maybe we kind of learned that being sad was a bad thing instead of that's just one of the emotion we have. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, I'll be sad. But is being sad what really makes it feel bad? Or is it the idea of, oh, I don't want to be sad, I don't want to be sad, I want that to go away, that makes us feel bad? You know what I mean? So anyway, that was really, yeah, this rainbow moment for me. And yeah, I thought I'll share that with you today. And I don't know what you think of that.
It's fab. I love it.
Yeah, I like it, Sandrine, a lot, because what you said about, like, if you have, I don't know, say let's take your purple. And purple is just a feeling. And the feeling is whatever the feeling feels like or is. But what changes our experience of it is the thinking that we then have about the purple. So it's sort of, they're two different things. There's the feeling of the purple, and then, which might be whatever. And then, like you said, it's like, well, whatever then thought we have about that. And because thought has a feeling, all that thinking that we're having has its own feeling. And it's that feeling which may be what is uncomfortable rather than the purple. So that's what I saw from listening to what you said. Yeah.
And to me, it sort of takes the pain away from sadness, from anxiety, from fear, because that part we create it through thoughts.
Yeah.
We will feel sad, we will feel anxious, we will feel all that. But the pain doesn't lie in that, I feel.
Mm.
And that's quite interesting. So still exploring that. Haven't felt anything strong enough this week. But I'm waiting now. I'm like, give me some so I can try that. I shouldn't say that, but yeah.
I think what's also really cool is I was listening to something a while ago, and the person said, was talking about sound, and they were saying about how sound isn't actually sound, because it only becomes sound when it meets our eardrums, in the sense that it's actually a vibration, and then the vibration hits our eardrum and we make it into sound. I don't know that much about these kind of things, but I think light is the same, like color is the same, that it's vibration, right? So in terms of, and then it hits our eyes and we interpret it as color. So like that metaphor works even bigger, I think, in the sense of inside out, because our senses are taking that information out there and converting it into the experience that we have. So it's a complete metaphor for the inside out understanding, in the sense that we're experiencing all these colors and we think that they're true, but actually we're experiencing them through our own mechanism, like in the same way that we experience thought, I think, which is a really nice sort of
That's cool. So here, like what I'm hearing is actually there is no colors on the rainbow. It's almost that we kind of create the color.
Yeah, and because other animals see different colors and stuff, don't they? And there are I don't know, I feel like I'm getting into dodgy ground here with my knowledge, but infrared and stuff we can't see with our senses, but other animals can. So their experience of color and light and stuff is very different from what ours is. But we think that what we're seeing is real, when actually it's real through our senses, but it's not an objective reality.
That is, it's so cool. I love that. And I've got, I don't know, since I'm a kid, I've got it's nothing scientific at all on that, but I'm sure we don't see the same. I'm sure we don't see the same color, because we just learned. So I could see, like, what you see blue, I could see it red, but we all agreed that it was blue. So we all call it blue, but it's not the same. Anyway, that's my thing. Since I'm a kid, I believe that. It might not be true, but it's kind of that. And it's how we experience, from it. Oh, I love that, Claire. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's so. I mean, the research in neuroscience has fully aligns with what you were saying, Claire, which is essentially we are living in a kind of virtual landscape of everything. All of our You know, all the things that we think we see is just an internal representation of the signals that come from the various ways that we interact with the environment. And all creatures do that. You know, bats that fly at night that use echolocation, we don't know how exactly they experience it, but they're living in their virtual world that makes sense. Dogs that smell, you know, 1,000,000 times better than we do live in a world rich with the information they're getting from their noses. So it is very much that our entire experience is kind of like a projection that's useful, you know, that evolution has equipped us with to make sense of the world in which we were developed in. But just as we see colors and, you know, shapes, I mean, the whole three-dimensional thing is a representation. It's not just colors, you know, the fact that we see table, the fact, I mean, one of the things you don't often hear about is there's a big part of the back of the eye which doesn't have any receptors. There's a big hole right in front of you. And yet your brain fills that in with what it assumes to be there. It's absolutely amazing when you read about how all this stuff works. But just as the physical stuff is kind of simply a projection, so the good and bad, the tough, the difficult, the easy, all these concepts that we label everything with are just concepts that we've kind of applied through our life because of our parents, our schools, our friends, and things we've decided. But those labels kind of, we think of them as permanent, but they're just sticky labels. And if we recognize that they're just sticky labels, more of them will drop off and more useful ones might float in.
I love that analogy, Frank. It's like not written with permanent marker. It's just a post-it that you can, well, I can put another one if I want to. That's so cool. But like, because I'm like, all the things that I feel I'm discovering now, I thought that was even engraved. It wasn't even or even like that. Actually, it was just there. It was naturally there, and it was how it was. But I didn't realize we, as a society, kind of put things there, and it's quite cool. You know, like, oh, that's that easy. It's quite freeing. I love it. So many good analogies. I love that. It's so easy then to remember. Sorry.
No, it's lovely. Really lovely.
It's such a good mood today.
Have a short one, Ron.
What?
I said maybe we've got a short one this week.
It's beautiful though.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't really want this in it, but it's like when you're in a low state of mind, that just, like, it just sounds too easy.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Like I get it, and I know it, but it just feels like it's just too easy, too simple. It's not, it doesn't work like that. But it does. Yeah, it's funny.
It's not an either or. It's like
No.
both of those things are true. It's like the low mood is true and all the expansive stuff that we're talking about is true, and they both exist in the same moment. It's just the one that we're tuning into at that point. And I think that's a really helpful, I find that a really helpful thing to consider, because it's not like we're talking about right and wrong. We're just talking about kind of, there's this huge spectrum, and at any one point we're tuned into one bit of it or another bit of it, and at any moment that can change. So it's kind of like, yeah, like a low mood is no more, it's just different, isn't it? It's just a different experience in the moment. And I don't know, that's kind of a key bit.
I think the thing is that low mood comes with a symptom of the low mood is, I don't want to be in this low mood.
We've talked about it lots. The resistance is the problem. That's where the suffering happens.
Yeah. So do you see how that effort to try and move on from it is actually what's...
It's funny because I don't even feel like I'm trying to move on from it. It's just like I just feel like I'm stuck in it. I'm like, okay, it'll pass. And you know, and I suppose I don't think I've, like what you guys said about the sensory stuff, I think there's something to be said for hormones and chemicals and stuff in your body as well, which I haven't, you know, so it's unfortunately stereotypically that time of the month. And I'm like, well, maybe that is just all it is. Maybe it's not that my thinking's just messed up. It's literally just that something else is happening and this is what's going on. I don't know, because then it doesn't make sense that that would be the only thing.
Then, yeah, maybe there is nothing to make sense of.
Yeah.
It's just right now. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get caught back in whatever maybe you've been caught before. Maybe it's just one of these moments where, and yeah, it's just there. And it happens all the time. And I know I shouldn't say the past because it's like,
Do you feel any sense of resistance to it, Ron?
I suppose I don't feel resistance to the low mood. It's resistance to the not being clear. So yeah, there's some resistance, but it's more like that.
Say some more about not being clear. What's that?
I don't know. I feel like there's a decision to be made again. And yeah, no, there is resistance, but it's really flimsy. It is really flimsy.
Just explore it if you're willing. Just because I think the resistance is kind of is part of why you're kind of feeling stuck. Because in a sense, the resistance, the stuck feeling is that you need to do something in order that you can move on. But if you're not sure what it is you need to do, then that's another kind of way that you can get.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm still just looking at it like outside in, like it's the outside situation that's making it feel hard. You know, and basically it's same old, you know, just with an added layer of complication, but it is still outside in, you know, it's not working outside in. Like I'm still looking at it as it's outside in rather than knowing that it's, which is like you said, it's fine, and it's not there all the time. So yeah. I'm not making any sense, but I'm okay. I just obviously want to cry.
I think cry is one of those colors on the rainbow.
Yeah, and it's weird because it feels foreign now, because it doesn't happen that often anymore where I get like this. So it feels completely weird. and like it's come out of nowhere, whereas this was my default. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's a weird experience as well, isn't it, when you find yourself there, when you know what the alternative is, and in a sense it's almost like it's really easy for this understanding to become something that it's not this understanding, but you know what I mean, like because you know the opposite, it can almost become something where it's sort of like, I mean, I know, for example, after I finished the one thought course the first time, and before I came on the listening program, there was a period in between where, unbeknownst to me, this was not conscious at all, but I had come up with this sort of belief, I suppose, that life was going to be easier. But I didn't know that I'd thought that. Like, now I have this understanding, and now I've done the course, I'm, you know, life's going to be easier. And then when I started the listening program, I saw that that's what had happened, and I'd sort of from nowhere had made up this new set of beliefs. And it was kind of I mean, it wasn't a particularly nice experience to go through, but when I saw what I'd done, I was like, oh, actually no, it's way more simple than I'd sort of made it up to be, in a sense that I was using it's so hard to describe this sometimes. I was using the things that the principles point to create this new experience, which was a new way of being myself up in a sense. And it wasn't the understanding, but I was using what it points to. I don't know, does that make any kind of sense? But what the interesting thing for me was that it was completely invisible until the moment it wasn't. I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of what happened to me.
That, Claire, I love that you made up a whole new set of beliefs that you kind of judged yourself by, or, you know, had as your kind of barometer of life, and that, yeah, and that you'd made them up thinking they were the truth. Yeah, because it's an explanation, isn't it, of how it works, rather than how you should live. It's like an understanding of how life works, not how you should live your life, or how life should be once you, that's, thank you so much. That's really helpful. Thank you. Because I can see that that happens. I can see it happens to me. Yeah.
So I had an interesting experience in the last week. So I actually, so I've felt for some time now that I've been in the flow most of the time. It's gone up and down, and there are periods when everything seems to go really well, and then other periods when it all gets a bit more sticky. But over the last week, I ended up in a sort of depressed mood. And it was interesting because it felt, I thought, God, this is familiar, but I haven't had this for ages. And I looked up, because one of the things that I've done in the past when I've ended up in that place is I kind of, I write to try and, I don't know, get some, I suppose what I'm trying to do is analyze my way out of the shitty feeling that I'm in. And I went back and I date it. So I went back, and it was all the way back into early May since I felt that way. And that was interesting, because that used to be 2 or 3 times a week. And it was interesting because I was thinking, oh, these thoughts were coming up like, oh, well, you know, this understanding doesn't really work. You know, oh, it's coming back. All these things were sort of floating in about what the fact that I felt shitty really meant. But what was different was that on some level, I kind of knew that this was just kind of something that was going to go on its own, and that I didn't, although I was kind of tempted to go and do the things I used to do to try and make it go, I thought, no, you know, that doesn't really work. So although it was actually, it ended up sort of hanging around for a few days, and it wasn't very pleasant. What was different this time was just seeing how much of a change there had been, because I'd kind of forgotten. I'd got to the point where I wasn't even sure that sort of state still existed, if you see what I mean. I don't know. In some way or other, that just hadn't become part of how I routinely was now. And I thought, oh, you're just looking at everything differently. But no, that feeling was definitely there. But it also kind of came with a knowing that that was okay. We talk about that sometimes, but there is something when you've seen this more clearly over time, there's something on some level reassuring that this isn't kind of any more significant than the fact that you're looking at purple. I love that analogy. I'm going to use that again. So, and then it popped, and it was like, it was gone, and all of a sudden it, you know, I think, you remember Star Trek when they used to use that thing when they went into hyperdrive and all the sort of image went blurry as the spaceship shot off at the speed of light. It's that, I mean, it's not literally like that, but there is, in some senses, that world just kind of morphs into another world, and all of a sudden it's, what was all that about? That was silly. Why was I so worked up about that? But I don't care why. I just know it happens, and I don't need to give any attention to it, really.
Thanks, Frank. That was so interesting to listen to, because it made me think how easy it is to be in that feeling and then go looking for the reasons, go looking for the fixes. And get caught up in a lot of activity, both thinking and maybe doing. Yeah, that aren't helpful and aren't necessary.
They're actually going in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Would you say more about why you think they're going in the wrong direction? Just, I'd love to hear you say why.
I suppose it's back to, so what we know is that we experience our thinking. So if the thinking that we're having, we think of it, we consider the meaning of that thinking, you know. So I'm having this feeling. I know that's coming from thought. And I know that thought will naturally move on. I'll think about something else. fresh thoughts will always arise. But if that particular thought seems meaningful, that I need to attend to it, I need to do something with that thought. If the thought I'm having is that I've got a problem and I've got to work it out, then that thought's going to stay around, because it's saying, hey, work me out, fix me, sort me out, otherwise your life's going to be shit. And if I kind of buy into that, if I think that is what's going on, then I'm putting my energy and making this thing seem more real, because it looks real, I'm treating it as real, instead of recognizing that it could just be one of those thoughts that comes in and goes out. My attention is making it more real. So when you say, the tendency for most people with thoughts that are a problem to them is they think they have to kind of solve them, that they're a puzzle. Analysis is required. And that's just more thought. And you're taking it more seriously. It's not saying that some thoughts that you have might need attention, but if they do, they will look as something to do when you feel good. But if the thought comes with a heaviness, that's a signal that that is simply some unhelpful thinking that you're having, a feeling that's coming with unhelpful thinking. So analysis, you can't think your way out of a bad feeling. You'll just intensify the feeling, is another shorthand way of thinking about it. It looks like it needs to be fixed. But as soon as you kind of, oh, that's what I'm doing, I'm just hanging on to it, let go. Just kind of release your grip as best you can. Just consider the possibility that it is nothing more than a thought that's passing that you've hung on to for too long. Did that help, Sally?
Yeah, it did, because it took me also back to Sandrine's rainbow. And I was thinking, you know, if you're ever experiencing purple, you're like, no, not liking the purple. And you kind of go in and you try and brush over the purple with the yellow. And, you know, and try to change the nature of purple by giving it some yellow. It's just going to make an almighty muddle and a really muddy colour. And like I said, it took me back to Sandrine's rainbow.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's much better than what I said.
And then the rainbow goes, and you have to wait that there is a bit more rain, a bit more sun, and that you don't know when it's gonna happen, but you know, come eventually.
That's true. It's true. It's not even, the rainbow won't even exist anymore once you start mucking around with all the colours.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
It's just a bit of a drought period at the moment. But that's pretty cool. And I think, to come back to what Frank was just saying, is I feel when there's these thoughts that are not really worth the attention, but we give them attention, when I've got that, usually it's like it keeps coming back, the same thing and again. When it's good thing, you think about it, you're good, and something else, and you don't have this again and again and again. You know, I find that when I catch myself having like thinking nonstop, you know, while you work, while you try to sleep or something, it's the same. And there is emergency that, yeah, you need to do something about it. Now I'm like, whoa, that's the signal that's one of the one that I shouldn't really actually like think about that much. Because if really that's something you have to do, usually this kind of thing that really you have to do something, you do it, right? You don't even have to think 3 days over it. And all these ones, they kind of, I mean, I don't know how they like behave on your side, but oh my God, they always do the same. And yeah, until you realize that, okay, it's interesting to yeah, just be aware of how they behave so you can recognize. Not that they go straight away, because obviously you've been like keeping them tight for a while, but it'll take a bit of time for them to go.
I remember George Pransky talking once, and he said this whole understanding is about learning a new relationship with your thinking. And I thought that was a lovely, simple way of kind of summing the whole thing up. Because your thinking is your thinking, and it just kind of, but most people come to it with the idea that it's a lot more significant than it really is. But learning, be comfortable with the thinking, learning to be comfortable with the difficult feelings that sometimes come with some of that thinking, and thinking that you need to fix it. All of that, learning that that's not really what helps. That's what makes the difference. Anyway, sorry, I kind of ended up talking over somebody.
No, I interrupted you, sorry. I was just going to say about how the thing that you were saying before about considering the possibility that something is thought is really the key part of this, isn't it? Because you can't make yourself stop thinking about something, and that just takes you into, that keeps you in the grip of it more. So it's just having that willingness and that sort of openness around that is the bit that's really helpful, because it's possible to be in the midst of all that thing, a bit like the example you gave before with the sort of feeling down. It's possible to be in that and experiencing it while also kind of having an inkling that it's not sort of true. And it goes back to the thing that the state of flow and the state of being gripped by a thought it's both of those things are true. Like we can be in both of those places. Yeah. I'm feeling like I'm being quite muddled today in my explanations, but I think it's a key thing because it is so tempting to try and force yourself to stop thinking about something, and that never ever works.
Yeah. It's the same as the analysis bit, trying to think your way out of thinking. It's another version of it. Whereas this is just saying, relax, let it flow.
And you know how we often say, like, I got a feeling we talked about that maybe like months ago, but you know, we say that oh well, like if you do something else, like, you know, there's all this self-help that take a bath, whatever. But actually, like, you know, the distracting yourself with doing something else, although that's not what makes it pass, but it does help. Like, you know, like you really see it if you start even just cooking a new recipe. That'll take your mind away enough. I mean, it does with me. So I have to focus on that, and I stop thinking. And for a moment, I've got a little break. And actually, I kind of, yeah, on purpose, you distract yourself from that sort. So you need to do something that's gonna catch your mind enough. I know that's not cooking that is helping me. It's just because I stopped thinking about it. But it's good to have these little breaks and to kind of, yeah, know what helps your mind stop focusing on what you do. Or like, I don't know, I dig something in the garden and plant something that just takes my mind off whatever I'm thinking. And yeah, it's and allowing yourself to do it and not thinking, oh no, I can't do that now because I I need to focus on that thing that's more important, right? And then I'll be able to do something. But it's actually like, okay, let's leave everything and or playing with the kids, or I don't know, something that is strong enough. I feel it's still helpful, despite the fact that, you know.
Yeah.
What's your thing?
I remember somebody, there was a way of explaining it that I quite liked. And the guy used to have a flip chart, and so he'd say, and he'd put a little black mark in the middle of this flip chart. And then he'd say, he'd stand, so he said, this is what's bothering you, okay? But what he would do was stand there with his nose up against this black dot. And he said, all you're looking at is the black dot, right? And it's like, this is your entire world at the moment. And then he said, so what you're deleting, not paying any attention to, is all the rest of this white sheet and the rest of the universe. So if you pull back from the black dot, then all of a sudden the black dot is just a tiny little dot in all of this. And that's it in effect. I mean, actually, again, neuroscience says, like, when we kind of focus in on something, it's really hard to see anything else. But if we realize that's all that's going on, that's why Deacon used to talk about the fact that he'd say, you know, oh, you're feeling awful. And then just kind of, and he'd do this. His shoulders would come down and his head would come up and his tonus would relax. And it's just like you're opening up. You've got that kind of expansive feeling. There's room for something else to come in. You stop hanging on, being gripped with what it was that was that tiny black dot that seemed like the whole world. Because you remember that it isn't the whole world. There is beautiful rainbows everywhere.
And you really see that how I love that. It's so cool. As like I hadn't seen her like since beginning of the year, and we just met up. She barely said hi, and then she's like, oh my God, da, 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 da. I was like, whoa. I was like, what? And I was like, I didn't even understand. But that's it. That a whole world was that thing, and it was nothing else existing. Not even how are you? It wasn't even part of the picture. There was no space for that. And I'm sure she was in that space with her nose right on that dot. That's so funny. So cool.
I like it as well, Frank, in relation, you know, the dot and the focus in relation to what you said about what George Prentice said around having a whole, I think this is what you said, whole new relationship to your thinking, which is there are some circumstances, I am sure, in which being able to focus on that dot and nothing else is a really useful attribute and really useful activity, where the rest of the world does disappear. And so what those two examples, what that way of thinking brought up for me is how well designed the system is, that we can have total focus on the dot when that is useful, and how other times we can go right back out and see the world. It's just if we've got a misunderstanding of what all the functions are there for, and you know, using them in ways they weren't designed for, that's when it becomes difficult. And maybe there's something in resistance, which is resistance, you know, that feeling is telling us we're pushing, you know, we're using the system in the wrong way. Maybe that's some of the resistance is a kind of flavor of that. I don't know. Yeah, how interesting to think that all of these, like you were talking about the bats, you know, we were saying, you know, about the bats earlier, or the sound waves, or all those different designs of how things work, that maybe it's occurring to me that what you've shared is just more examples of that. The design works like to allow you to focus on something and nothing else, or it allows you to have wide focus. But if you get in a muddle over which one is helpful for what activity, oops, that's oversimplified, but you know, then life will give you a feeling as to say, no, you're kind of holding that from the wrong end. You're holding that from the blunt end when you should be using the sharp end, or whatever. Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you.
I think some of the three principles community use this distinction between sort of intellectual thinking and being in touch with your wisdom or your inner guidance, or I mean, and not, you know, we also talk about the head and the heart, don't we, in that sort of thing, in popular language, and I think that's a sort of it's a sort of the emotional. It's Mr. Spock and then our emotional selves, and I guess sometimes we try and apply our Mr. Spock part to trying to solve things that are coming through as feelings. It sounds a bit weird because Mr. Spock reputedly didn't have any feelings, but I guess the analytical part where it works is, you know, probably often, Sally, in your work where you're trying to, you know, put a proposal together, or I don't know, I don't really know what you do, but I'm sure there are times when the analytical part is entirely appropriate, but we also tend to take that, because that's what we're schooled in, isn't it? That's what the academic world basically trains us to think analytically. But then we try and apply that into our relationships and all sorts of other areas of our life where it just doesn't work very well. So this is where, in a sense, you know, that emotional feeling that it's the right thing to do to look so close up. Whereas getting some perspective on it, opening up to fresh thought, that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. And that's what I've been doing. It's so funny, isn't it, when you see it? You're like, when you said, Sandrine, about your friend, I was like, yeah, I did exactly that to a friend this week. Phoned her up, blah, 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 blah. Luckily, she's a good enough friend that I can do that with. But yeah, I was pretty smushed up in front of that dot, I suppose. That was a really lovely feeling conversation. Thank you, everybody.
So, Brian, are you feeling a little different now?
Yeah. Has anybody got anything to say before we end off? I'm feeling very calm and peaceful. I enjoyed that. Thank you very much. No? So thank you, everybody, for listening and for joining us this week. And we shall see you again next week. Okay. Bye.
Bye.